Yeah, what's up, y'all? Mark the Well back again. Hey, look, the Connotation series has begun, much anticipated. First word up on the Connotation lineup, Argumentative. Now, you're going to notice in these videos, I do it from a different angle than I normally shoot my videos because I'm going to come from a different angle. First word up, first round draft pick is the word argumentative. What is the connotation behind the word argumentative? It's negative, not something desirable, not something that you want to tolerate from an individual, not something that you want to be. Well, let's talk about the connotation of argumentative and how that's a bunch of crap. You know what I think of when I think of the word argumentative that I don't think a lot of people think of or factor in? When I think of one who is argumentative, the first thing I think of is someone who is a good communicator. Now, please understand, in order to be a good communicator, you have to be able to communicate your disposition, opinion, and perspectives. If you can't communicate those things, you can't even argue. You can't debate. You can't do any of that. So that's the first thing in the connotation of the word argumentative or the concept of being argumentative. How do you argue? You know what the status quo common connotation behind the word argumentative is: projecting and kind of pushing. People who be based in their feelings, people who aren't good communicators, people that can't present fact based or thought out perspectives. That's what I think of when I think of argumentative. I think of people who can do all those things. You can't argue if you just coming with feelings and stuff. And that's what most people come with. They'll try to chalk up what you're saying to it just being how you feel and not what you've observed or not what you've researched or not what you've experienced. And even if that is what you're articulating from, well, what do you do when you come across someone who has observed something different? Someone who has experienced something different? I mean, maybe you have a college background or, you know, maybe you don't even have to go that far. Just a typical school background. You know how research can go. You can give people a topic. For example, how likely was it for Germany to win in World War II? And you can come up with two different dispositions based on doing that research. You can come up with ways where it says there's no way they could have won that war. And there would be facts and there would be details, and there would be certain points that could be made that would paint that picture that there's really no way that they could have won the war once they went on two fronts, especially trying to fight to the east and to the west. But then you may find yourself, I guess they call it a rabbit hole. That's another word. I should write that down, rabbit hole, because that has a connotation to it too. But you could fall, sadly, it would have to be called a rabbit hole because that wouldn't be the most popular perspective. But you could fall upon details, facts, and documentaries and testimonies that show how they could have won. So research could be funny. But the point is, what do you do when you have two different sides that research brought you to? You should be able to debate or even argue with the other side if both are knowledgeable. Now, if one side isn't knowledgeable, and generally when people aren't knowledgeable, that means they just come with their opinions not backed up by any type of research or experience or observations or even case studies, if you will. That's an interesting concept. So let's just talk about how likely was Germany to win World War II. You know, I'll probably be of the disposition that there it was most likely that they would be defeated. But you know one thing I can say, since I'm a argumentative person, despite that being my gut feeling and the first conclusion that I would draw, and probably if I was a gambling man, that's what I would go with. Yeah, they were destined for defeat. But you know what I can say, even to entertain the other side? If those generals and leaders were a bit more argumentative when it came to Hitler, they might have stood a better chance. A lot of those things that was going on with that German army, that Third Reich, even an amateur war enthusiast or war historian or one who knows war tactics would know that a lot of things that they were trying to do was just outright foolish. Not only that, but a lot of things that they were doing that worked, they stopped doing. A lot of people don't know this, but Hitler was basing a lot of his strategies and what he would do based off of astrology and silly mess like that, witchcraft, and things not practical to what's going on. Trying to go and invade Russia was argued against, but not heavily enough. And not only that, but I got this saying the majority rules in the favor of fools. And the majority did not oppose and argue strong enough against that. Had they not have done that, who knows? That war could have gotten drug out to the point where some type of truce or some type of compromise, you know, some type of ceasefire or some type of negotiation was made. Had they not have done the silliness. But no, for the most part, they just went along with whatever Hitler said. It's kind of funny that I'm using Hitler as an example, but that just goes to paint how going along with whatever the energy or entity that you're supposed to agree with all the time, that's not, sometimes that can literally be the difference between life and death, victory and defeat, literally in that case. Here's the other thing about being argumentative. Generally, when people use the word argumentative, that means they don't like their opinion, perspective, strategy, or methods being challenged. Any strong personality, any humble person, any critical thinking person, you will rarely hear them use the word argumentative. Pay attention to when that word argumentative is used. It's generally used coming from a narcissistic mind state, an arrogant mind state. You know what I'm saying? It's coming from some angle of like, this person should just go along with what I say, or this person should just stop challenging my authority, or this person should just stop thinking. We live in a society where we want echo chambers. We want yes men and yes women. We want people that are loyal to us. And by loyal, not even in the sense of always having your best interest in mind. No. Loyal in the sense as in wanting people that are agreeable, wanting people that are easily manipulated, wanting people that will go along to get along primarily. But the reality is that is not how most of the success in this world came about. Not by agreeable men or women, even for that matter. The person that you admire the most, I guess you could pick some in modern day, but you go back in history and look at people who made impacts in this world, they would probably be called argumentative. Now, you can go to people who were kings and queens and generals and had positions of authority, but even them themselves, they were argumentative in the sense that they had their unique way of applying themselves, and they had to be able to articulate that. They had to be able to welcome the challenges to their thought process, welcome the challenge to their preferred method, and then be able to either refute the challenge or deconstruct the challenge or reject the challenge. And most of them won't just like, nah, no, nah, end the discussion. Because having that type of mind state does not increase your wisdom. Having that type of mind state does not help you to solidify whatever the things that you agree with are, or whatever the things that you have developed as your perspectives and opinions and philosophies. You won't get anywhere in the world only hearing people that regurgitate how you see things. Your brain is a muscle. Your brain literally needs to be exercised. And you know how you build muscle? With resistance. I mean, that's how you build muscle, right? Resistance, constant exercise, constant motion, regardless of what it is. From the highest application, bodybuilding and weightlifting, down to just walking. When you walk and you build up your muscles or even your cardio and things like that, you're resisting. Literally, walking is falling and catching yourself with your feet. You step forward. If there was no ground, you would just continue to go that way. Your foot hits the ground, resist it as the ground resists you, and then you balance yourself, apply equal pressure, and then you take another step. How would you walk if there was no how would you walk if there was no resisting force? So you couldn't run, you couldn't jump. Nature doesn't even back up. Physics doesn't even back up an attack on being argumentative, because that's basically how argumentative is applied these days, is a distaste for resistance. That's why people aren't getting wiser these days. They reach a certain level, they develop a certain opinion, and they do not want it contested. Dang sure don't want it rejected. And sometimes you don't even have to get to rejection. But see, people, there's this concept of snowflake. And it's very interesting. Snowflake. That's how people have gotten these days, a snowflake mentality. Now, mind you, most people that arbitrarily throw out the word snowflake, those are the strong minded, opinionated people who love to put their opinion and perspectives out. But as soon as someone comes and resists that or challenges that, they start to immediately go to either feeling like they're being attacked, so therefore the other person has to be making some type of advance based in emotion and feelings, or that the other person is just ignorant. That to me, a snowflake is somebody who can't handle opinions outside of their own, who can't handle thought processes outside of their own. That's what a snowflake would be. A snowflake would be that person who goes who lives in Boston, but they walk into a bar with a New York Yankees jersey on, and once they start getting that heat, getting a little bit of you know resistance from the home crowd, which is Boston. Obviously, they're gonna be Red Sox fans. They get all like wanting to fight, not even willing to play the game. You know what's going to happen. You walk into a bar in Boston, or or if you just walk around in public in Boston with a Yankees jersey on, you're gonna get a little bit of heat. People can barely even do that now because they know they don't like an argumentative energy. Another thing, another way people use the word argumentative is just to reinforce their arrogance. A lot of times people use that word argumentative in a very arrogant manner. That's a tap out word. Start calling you argumentative because they feel like they ain't getting nowhere with you. Or better yet, that they haven't conquered you. I don't know if you use that word. If you do, I hope this video is helping you. If you have that word used against you, I hope this video is helping you. Because it's just really interesting when I see people use that word, so I decided that I would make a video talking about it. The vast majority of the time when people use the word argumentative is because either they cannot articulate, defend, or communicate their disposition better than the person in resistance or that which is challenging them. Another way they use agreeableness is when they feel superior to that which is challenging them, or they feel that that which is challenging them is inferior. For example, Martin Luther King was argumentative, right? He argued for civil rights. He resisted the status quo and common way of things being back in that time. Could he have gotten anywhere if he wasn't argumentative? Because, see, if he wasn't argumentative, there's no way that he could have used words. And be careful when you use that word argumentative, because sometimes people will just stop arguing with you. But that don't mean that they're going to forfeit. See, a lot of times, argumentativeness, that is the buffer between civil discourse, civil constructive disagreement, and violence. Ironically, that's what they didn't like about Malcolm X. Because he wasn't so much willing to argue like Martin Luther King was. He would argue, he would resist, he was very well spoken, but there's a little bit of a deviation between how long Malcolm X was willing to argue and how long and how long Martin Luther King was willing to argue. And we all know who the champion is between those two. We all know who's more beloved between Malcolm X and Martin Luther King. It's interesting and profound. And that's not even to say which one you agree with more, which one do you favor more, which one was more impactful. Actually, I do have to say this. Those who know their history and actually followed Martin Luther King's trials and tribulations and his journey all the way up to the end, in essence, he recanted a lot of the perspectives and energy that he spent the vast majority of his civil rights campaign putting out. In the end, he kind of realized, like, I think, you know, for lack of better words, he's like, I think I compromised in the end too much. Like he laid down his sword too soon. Because, see, what it boils down to is, whereas there were many of people from all races that agreed and, empathized or even sympathized with what he was saying, there was an overwhelming amount that argued against what he was advocating for. Not even to push it to the end in that part. The point is, do you see how many prominent people in history were argumentative? We live in a country. If you live in America, you should not be using the word argumentative. Another disrespectful thing that comes from argumentative, and I don't know where this came from. It's just the generation we live in and the time frame we live in. But I don't know where people get off using the word back talk. There'll be people 20 years your junior saying you back talking them because of the position of authority. Like, what in the hell? And back talking is another implication of authority or superiority to somebody. It's funny how that word back talking can just get thrown around, which is basically someone not conforming, someone not laying down, someone not just taking a hyper subordinate disposition on you. And that's what people want. This is why our country, our world, in my opinion, is kind of crumbling. And that goes from adversaries and people I wanted to fail. For example, I brought up Germany. Ain't no way I wanted Germany to win. Even in America, I didn't want the South to win the Civil War. I'd still be a slave. But people had a lot more resiliency, tenacity, and fortitude in days prior, generations prior. Now it's really sad how we've gotten. Everybody's argumentative. It's a very sad cop out. Wrap this all up by saying the connotation of argumentative is off. You don't argue with a fool. That holds so much substance. Because a fool isn't equivalent to someone who disagrees with you. A fool isn't someone who has a different perspective or opinion. A fool is somebody that just can't even back it up or articulate it, or doesn't even really have anything behind why they feel the way they feel, or think the way they think, or see things the way they see things. To me, that's a fool. So when I say you can't argue with a fool, you literally can't argue with someone who can't argue. And someone who can't argue is someone who, A, just can't communicate, or or they don't even feel they should have to. Like, you couldn't argue with a white supremacist about why they're wrong in essence, because they might not even give you the platform, stage, or opportunity to challenge them if you are of a race they deem inferior. So really, they can't argue, and they're not willing to, because they're superior. So understand how I'm applying argumentative right there. Some people are argumentative and they shun away from this and paint it in a negative light because of a superiority complex. Now, whereas obviously I do not agree with any type of extreme supremacist philosophy, because I think we're all children of God, and when it's all said and done, we're supposed to be trying to move together as mankind. But I'll have more respect for the ones that sit down and will, you know, get around and debate, defend their perspectives. Gosh, it's annoying. It's very frustrating because you'll get them to bringing up statistics, saying, uh, 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 studies show, and they come with all this crap. Most of them are mythical. Like back in the days when they used to say that black people had smaller brain capacity than their white counterparts. Like, that's, you can't even really argue that. But see, intellectual people understand the beauty of arguing. And when I say you can't argue that, is because you that literally has no empirical, factual, credible backing to it. And secondly, you can't argue that with them because if you're black and you're trying to bring that up, their immediate cop out would be like, oh, see, this person's being argumentative. See, it's because of their smaller brain capacity. Like, it's a lot of circular reason that comes from people that want to throw out argumentative and argue around like it's just something that should be perceived solely with a negative connotation. I hope this video gave some perspective, or maybe even reinforced those who may have seen it this way or were more leaning towards the angle that I took on this. Let me know how y'all feel about this one. Next up, the next word, man, I had to go with this one. This was the first round draft. The next episode I'm gonna do in the Connotation series is probably gonna be agreeable, because I think that would be what would be perceived as the antonym to argumentative is agreeable. Stay tuned for that one. You might like that one if you like this one. Or if you didn't like this one, just please make sure you have some reasons why. And should you comment, please be able to articulate yourself and communicate. That's all I ask. Next up, agreeable. Deuces.